There is something in the Appalachian Mountains that doesn't want to be found. But it will find you. I'm going to tell you about 3 people who went into those hills, hikers, locals, people just like you, and what came back was never quite the same. One of them still can't sleep with the windows open. One of them moved 3 states away and still checks the locks twice. And one of them, well, you'll understand by the end. Before we get into it, if you're new here, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment. Share this with someone who loves a good scare, and press that bell icon so you never miss a story. We post real horror every single week. Now, turn off the lights, and don't go anywhere. Story 1. The Man on the Ridge. It was late September when my cousin Derek decided to do a solo section hike through a stretch of the Appalachian Trail in southwestern Virginia. He'd done it before, nothing fancy, just 3 nights out, a modest loop through some of the older, quieter sections of the trail. He knew the area, or at least he thought he did. The first day was uneventful. He made good time, set up camp just before dark, near a small creek off a fire road, and fell asleep to the sound of water moving over rocks. Normal. Peaceful, even. It was the second morning when things started to feel wrong. He woke up around 5 a.m., still dark. That heavy blue-black dark you only get deep in the mountains, and noticed his food bag had been touched, not opened, not destroyed, just moved. It was still hanging from the bear line exactly where he'd left it, but it was facing a different direction. So he told himself it was the wind. He packed up and kept moving. By midday, he'd climbed up to a high ridgeline and stopped to eat lunch, with a view looking out over the valley. Beautiful country. All orange and gold, that kind of autumn color that looks like something out of a painting. He sat on a rock, pulled out some trail mix and looked out, and then he looked down. Far below, maybe half a mile back on the trail he'd just come up, there was a man standing still, just standing there. No pack, no poles. Just a figure in dark clothing, standing in the middle of the trail, looking up at the ridge. Looking at him. Derek told himself it was just another hiker. Maybe someone who'd stopped to rest. Maybe someone glassing the valley for deer. He finished eating, packed up, and kept moving north along the ridgeline. 3 hours later, he dropped down off the ridge and crossed a gap in the trail, a low saddle between 2 peaks. He stopped at the gap to check his map. He heard a branch snap. He looked back down the trail. The same man was there. Same dark clothing. No pack. Same distance. Maybe a quarter mile. Derek watched him for a long moment. The man didn't move. Didn't wave. Didn't call out. Just stood. Derek walked faster. He pushed hard for the next 2 hours and made it to the shelter he'd planned to stay at, a 3-sided Adirondack-style lean-to, sitting in a small clearing surrounded by dense hardwood forest. 2 other hikers were already there, a couple from Tennessee, probably in their 40s, who'd been on the trail for a week. He was deeply relieved to see them. He told them about the man on the ridge. The woman's expression didn't change, but her husband got quiet. He asked Derek to describe the clothing again. Dark jacket, no pack, standing very still. The husband nodded slowly and said, "We saw him too. Yesterday, about 8 miles south of here." Derek asked if they'd reported it to anyone. The husband said they hadn't, because, and this is the part that got me when he told me the story, they didn't think it was worth reporting a man just standing on a trail. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't threatening. But then the husband said something else. He said that when they first saw the man standing on the trail the day before, he'd been watching them through the trees for what had to be 20 minutes. He was certain of it. Not walking, not resting, just watching. And when they finally approached and got close enough to call out to him, the man turned and walked off the trail into the woods, not on any path, straight into the dense brush, and he was just gone, like the forest swallowed him. Derek slept in the shelter that night with his knife on his chest. Around 2 a.m. he woke up. He didn't know why at first. Then he heard it. Footsteps on the leaf litter just outside the clearing. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Walking in a wide circle around the shelter. Not getting closer, not going away. Just circling. In the morning, Derek found boot prints in the soft mud at the edge of the clearing. Deep, large. They circled the shelter completely, and they came from the direction of the trail, and then they disappeared. Like the person had walked to the edge of the clearing, circled it once, and simply ceased to exist. Derek packed up before sunrise and hiked out 9 miles to the trailhead in one push. He hasn't been back since. He still doesn't know who that man was. And I think that's the part that keeps him up at night. Not knowing is so much worse. Story 2. What knocked on the cabin door? My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm telling you this, because I've never told anyone the full version of what happened that night. And I don't think I can carry it alone anymore. I grew up in a small holler in eastern Kentucky, deep in the mountains. The kind of place where your nearest neighbor is a 20-minute drive on a dirt road, and your cell service is a rumor. My grandmother's property sat at the end of one of those roads, a 2-bedroom cabin that had been in our family since the 40s, surrounded on 3 sides by thick second-growth forest, and on the 4th by a creek that flooded every spring. I was 26 and going through a divorce. I needed quiet. My grandmother was in assisted living by then, and the cabin was sitting empty, so I drove up in November and planned to stay a month, maybe 2. The first week was fine, healing even. I chopped wood, read books, slept 10 hours a night. The nearest town was 30 miles. I had no internet, spotty phone service, and a propane generator I ran for 2 hours every evening. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. Then on the 9th night something knocked on the door. It was just after midnight. I was in bed reading by flashlight when I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow. Even. Deliberate. Like a person knocking, but with something that wasn't a fist. Not the sound of knuckles. More like a single hard object tapping. 3 times. Then silence. My first thought was an animal. A raccoon maybe, or a bear investigating the porch. I lay still and waited. Nothing. After a few minutes I got up and looked out the window beside the door. The porch was empty. The motion sensor light I'd set up hadn't triggered. I told myself I'd imagined it and went back to bed. 20 minutes later, 3 more knocks. Same cadence. Same sound. This time I grabbed my grandfather's flashlight, the big aluminum kind, heavy enough to use as a weapon, and I opened the door. Nothing. The porch was empty. The yard was empty. The tree line sat dark and still about 40 feet away. The motion light was still off. Whatever had knocked had not triggered a sensor designed to detect a deer walking across the yard. I stood on the porch for a long time, shining the flashlight out into the dark. The beam caught the tree line but couldn't reach beyond it. And just at the edge of the light, I saw the shape of something that bothered me. Not dramatic. Not a monster. Just a shape that seemed wrong. Like the outline of something too tall to be a deer, too still to be a tree, positioned right at the edge of the darkness where the light wouldn't reach it cleanly. I went back inside. I locked the door. I pushed the kitchen table against it. At 3 a.m. the knocking came again. Same 3 knocks, same sound. But this time it wasn't at the door. It was at the window above my bed. I was on the 2nd floor. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I lay absolutely still in the dark with my grandfather's flashlight in both hands, and I listened. The knocking didn't come again. But I heard something else. Slow, even breathing. Just on the other side of the glass. Close enough that when I finally worked up the nerve to look, the window was fogged. From the outside. I drove out that same morning before the sun came up. 30 miles of dirt road in the pitch dark, because I was more afraid of what was behind me than anything the road could throw at me. I've tried to explain it away for years. Odd acoustics, branches, an animal I'd never seen. But breathing on glass from the outside of a 2nd-floor window in a cabin with no porch, no roof extension, no tree within reaching distance of that wall. There is no explanation I can live with. I just don't think about it. Most days. Story 3. They never found all of him. This one isn't mine. It belongs to a search and rescue volunteer named Paul who worked the mountains of western North Carolina for 11 years. He told me this story himself at a diner in Asheville, and he cried once in the middle of it, quietly, like a man who's practiced not crying, and then finished his coffee and stared at the table for a long time before he spoke again. I'm going to tell it the way he told it to me. In March of 2019, a man went missing in a wilderness area south of the Blue Ridge Parkway. He was 53 years old, retired schoolteacher, experienced hiker, had done the section dozens of times. His wife reported him missing after he failed to return from a day hike, a 5-mile out and back he'd done many times before. Search and rescue mobilized within hours. Paul was part of the first team on the ground. They found his truck at the trailhead, locked, keys inside, which in itself isn't unusual. They found his pack about a mile up the trail, set carefully against a tree like he'd put it down to rest and planned to come back for it. His water, his food, his emergency kit, his rain jacket, everything, just sitting there, neatly arranged, undisturbed, like he'd decided he didn't need any of it anymore. They followed the trail another half-mile and found his boots, both of them, set side by side, exactly heel to heel, in the middle of the trail. No socks, no sign of a struggle. The laces were still tied. Paul said he'd been on over 200 searches. He'd seen a lot of things that disturbed him, but those boots set him off in a way he couldn't fully articulate. Because removing your boots on a cold march trail deep in the mountains wasn't confusion. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. They searched for 11 days. On the 4th day they found a piece of his flannel shirt, caught on a branch about a mile off trail, in terrain with no clear path, dense mountain laurel, steep ravines, the kind of wilderness you don't enter without serious preparation. On the 7th day, a dog team found something at the bottom of a ravine, a section of clothing, personal effects, biological material that was consistent with the man. They determined he had died. The cause was listed as exposure. But Paul said that wasn't the part that stayed with him. The part that stayed with him was the journal, turned up on the 9th day, wedged into a rock crevice about 2 miles from where any of his other belongings had been found. Small field journal, the kind with a rubber band closure. The last entry was dated the day he went missing. Paul was one of 3 people who read it. He wouldn't tell me everything that was in it. He said it wasn't his to share, out of respect for the family. But he told me this much. He said the man had written about hearing something following him for the last hour of his hike. He wrote that it wasn't an animal because it moved too quietly and stopped when he stopped. He wrote that when he turned around he never saw anything, but he could feel it. And he used that word specifically, feel it watching him from just inside the tree line. The last line of the journal read, "I don't think I'm going to make it back to the truck." They never found all of him. Paul said the family was told that was due to the terrain and wildlife activity. And maybe that's true. That's all it was. But Paul told me that in 11 years of search and rescue, in hundreds of operations, he'd developed a sense for cases that had a clean explanation and cases that didn't sit right. He said this one never sat right. He said the journal never sat right. And he said the boots, set so carefully, heel to heel, in the middle of the trail, never sat right. He retired from SAR 6 months after that search. He moved out of the mountains entirely. And he said to me, before he left the diner that day, whatever's in those hills, it doesn't want witnesses. 3 stories. 3 different corners of the same ancient range of mountains. A man circled in the night. A knock with no knuckles. Boots left behind on a cold trail. The Appalachians are one of the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. People have disappeared into them for centuries. Most of those disappearances have explanations. Most. If you're planning to hike out there, and I'm not saying don't go, just pay attention. Pay attention to the sound that stops when you stop. The shape at the edge of your flashlight beam. The feeling that the trail behind you is no longer empty. Because sometimes in those mountains, you are not alone. And whatever is with you, it is very, very patient. If these stories got under your skin the way they got under mine, please hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me which story disturbed you the most. Share this with someone who needs to lose a little sleep tonight, and subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified the moment our next video drops. We'll be back soon. And until then, sleep with one eye open.